They say dogs find their way home. But what if they're not looking for home, but for someone? On a cold November night, a battered German shepherd collapsed on the porch of a family who had never met him. He was injured, drenched, silent. Most would have turned him away, but not Elliot. The 5-year-old boy stepped past his shocked parents and knelt beside the bleeding dog like he'd been waiting for him. "He's not scary," Elliot said softly. "He's sad." And from that moment, the dog later identified as a missing police canine named Kai refused to leave his side. No one could explain the connection, not the boy's calm in the face of danger, not the dreams that followed, dreams of forests, of a man in uniform, of betrayal. Elliot wasn't imagining them. He was remembering them. Through Kai. And what they uncovered together would unravel a secret buried beneath floorboards, stitched into files, and soaked in blood. He wasn't just a dog. He was a witness. The rain didn't fall, it wept. Long, steady ribbons of water slashed through the night sky, washing the streets of Millstone in a relentless downpour that whispered against windows and hissed over rooftops. Thunder didn't crack so much as rumble low, like a warning buried deep in the earth's chest. Each gust of wind rattled the siding of the small Bennett home, making the old oak out front sway like a sentinel under siege. Inside, the yellow kitchen light flickered faintly above the Bennett family as they went about their quiet evening routine, unaware that fate had already begun its slow approach. Ryan stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup. His brow furrowed as he glanced at his phone. No signal again. "Storm's killing the reception," he muttered. Across the room, Clara wiped her hands on a dish towel and peered through the fogged-up window. "It's really coming down out there," she said. "Feels heavier than usual, like something's about to break." Ryan chuckled softly. "That's just the soup boiling over." But Clara didn't laugh. In the living room, 5-year-old Elliot sat cross-legged on the thick rug, his small body dwarfed by the plush armchair behind him. He didn't notice the rumble of thunder or the flicker of lights. He was somewhere else, somewhere quiet. Lined up in front of him were 12 toy cars, arranged with perfect symmetry. He wasn't playing, he was organizing. One by one, he adjusted each car's direction, making sure they pointed forward toward something invisible. Then he stopped. Elliot's hand hovered over a blue police cruiser, but his eyes were fixed on the front window. He tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to a voice no one else could hear. The room around him blurred into stillness. "Elliot?" Clara called, her voice breaking gently into the silence. "Honey, dinner's almost ready. You want to help me set the table?" But Elliot didn't move, didn't blink. The boy slowly rose to his feet and padded toward the window barefoot, his pajamas brushing the floor. His breath fogged the glass as he leaned in, pressing a hand to the cold pane. "He's out there," he whispered. Clara wiped her hands again and approached, kneeling beside him. "What, sweetheart? Do you see a raccoon again?" Elliot shook his head slowly, eyes still glued to the darkness beyond. "No. It's someone else." "He's cold." Ryan joined them with a puzzled expression. "Did he say someone's out there?" Before either parent could ask more, a flash of lightning lit up the porch like a camera flash. For a split second, Clara thought she saw a shape move just beyond the steps. Then it was gone, swallowed by shadow and sheets of rain. And then came the sound. Not the erratic scratching of a branch, nor the skittering of small paws, but something deliberate, slow, heavy. A low, dragging scrape followed by a single thump, like something pressing its weight against the front door. Ryan froze. Clara's hand instinctively moved to Elliot's shoulder. Again scrape, thump, then a soft, broken whine, a sound not quite human. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "Ryan." "I hear it." He was already moving. Ryan crossed the living room and approached the door with cautious steps, pausing only to grab the umbrella stand as an impromptu weapon. He looked back once, his eyes locking with Clara's. "Take Elliot to the hallway, just in case." But Elliot stepped forward and tugged his father's sleeve. "It's okay, Dad. He's not here to hurt us. He's lost." Ryan blinked. "What did you say?" Elliot met his father's eyes with a calmness far older than his years. "Please, let him in." Something about the boy's certainty, his unwavering stillness, drove a spike of unease through Ryan's chest. But he turned the knob. The door creaked open. Rain rushed in like breath held too long, slapping against Ryan's chest and flooding the entryway with cold, damp air. But that wasn't what stole the air from his lungs. There, slumped just beyond the threshold, was a dog, a massive German shepherd, soaked to the bone, his dark fur matted with blood and mud. His side bore a long, cruel gash, crusted at the edges and still oozing. His front paw trembled as he tried to rise and failed. Clara gasped. The dog's head lifted weakly. He looked at Ryan, then at Elliot. Not wildly, not fearfully, but with eyes the color of worn amber, old, deep, pleading. Ryan couldn't move. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, just waited. And then Elliot stepped past both of them, knelt beside the creature and whispered, "His name is Kai. He needs us." Rain poured, the wind howled, thunder cracked, and somewhere within that storm something changed. For one breathless moment, no one moved. The rain hissed on the porch like static, sheeting over the figure slumped in the doorway. The dog didn't lift his head again. He simply lay there, as if the act of making it that far had drained the last ounce of strength from him. Water dripped from his ears, his muzzle, his tail. A puddle was already forming beneath his ribs, tinged faintly red. Clara gasped from behind Ryan, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, my God!" Ryan took a cautious step forward, the porch light above flickering as if in warning. His eyes swept over the animal. It wasn't just the size, though the dog was easily 90 pounds, muscular under the grime and wet fur. It was the wound. A jagged, inflamed gash ran along the shepherd's flank, crusted with blood, too deep to be from a simple accident. Clara's voice was tight. "Is he alive?" "Barely." Ryan crouched low, inching closer. He extended a hand just above the animal's head, but didn't touch. The dog didn't snarl, didn't flinch. His eyes fluttered open, sluggish and dim, and met Ryan's with something that landed heavier than fear resignation. He'd stopped running. Behind them, Elliot stepped forward into the doorway. Rain speckled his cheeks, sticking his hair to his forehead. His voice came soft, sure. "His name is Kai." Clara turned. "Elliot, sweetheart, don't get too close." "He's not going to hurt us," the boy said calmly, almost like he was stating the weather. He came here because he knew we'd help. Ryan turned slightly. How do you know that, buddy? Elliot pointed at the dog. Because he told me. Ryan looked back at the shepherd. One of the dog's ears twitched. Another whimper, softer than before, rose from deep in his chest. The kind of sound that didn't ask, it pleaded. Clara stepped into the rain despite herself. Ryan, we can't just leave him there. He won't survive the night. I know, Ryan murmured. But I don't want to do something stupid with our son standing right here. Clara's eyes flicked to Elliot, who was still as stone watching the dog, not in fear but with an empathy too deep for a child his age. There's something about him, she whispered. Something old. Ryan exhaled, running a hand through his damp hair. Okay. Let's at least get him out of the rain. He moved slowly, speaking under his breath as he approached. All right, big guy. Don't make me regret this. When his hands slipped under the shepherd's chest and hind legs, the dog whimpered again, but didn't struggle. His body was too light for his frame, ribs too sharp under the fur. Ryan could feel tremors vibrating through him. Shock, maybe fear, or maybe just the final thread of consciousness unraveling. Elliot held the door open. Bring him to the rug. Ryan carried the dog inside, rainwater dripping from his coat and pooling on the hardwood floor. He lay the shepherd down near the fireplace, on top of the soft woolen rug where Elliot usually played with his cars. Clara rushed to throw down towels, already trembling as she reached for the first aid kit. Ryan kneeled beside the dog, watching the rise and fall of his chest, uneven but steady. Jesus, he muttered. What happened to you? Clara dabbed at the gash with a cloth, but the blood kept soaking through. This wasn't a car accident. No, Ryan said quietly. That cut's too clean, too straight. Kai let out another faint whine, his eyes half-lidded but still watching Elliot. The boy had crouched beside him now, knees drawn under his chin, one small hand resting gently on the dog's massive paw. You're home now, Elliot said softly. It's okay to rest. For the first time, Kai moved just a twitch of the tail. But it was enough. Clara blinked through the rising moisture in her eyes. He responded to that. Ryan nodded slowly. He heard him. Lightning flashed again through the window, illuminating the room in stark silver. The lights flickered once more, but stayed on. Outside, the storm howled. But inside, in that quiet living room with a wounded stranger on the rug and a child who somehow knew his name, the chaos didn't feel so close anymore. It felt like something had shifted, not broken, not entered, arrived. The living room smelled like wet earth and blood. Rain still hammered the roof above them, the windows trembling faintly with every gust of wind. The world outside had turned to storm and shadow, but inside, the Bennett home stood still, almost reverent, as if the house itself sensed that something sacred had just crossed its threshold. Kai lay curled near the fireplace now, wrapped in a thick flannel blanket that Clara had once bought for camping trips they never took. His breathing was shallow, the rise and fall of his chest uneven and slow. His wound cleaned as best as they could with antiseptic, and gauze still leaked in dull pulses. Clara stood a few feet away, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her fingers gripped her elbows like they were holding her together. Her voice, when it came, was low, controlled, almost too quiet. Ryan, we don't know where he's been. We don't even know what happened to him. Ryan didn't look up from where he sat on the floor beside the dog, hand hovering protectively near Kai's head. I know. What if he has something? Rabies, infections, We have a 5-year-old in the house. This isn't just a lost puppy." Ryan nodded. "You're right." Clara blinked. That wasn't the answer she expected. "I know it's dangerous," he said, "and I know it's crazy, but look at him." She did. Kai's body was tense, even in rest muscles coiled like springs that had been forced to snap for far too long. One paw twitched slightly as he shifted, and a low grunt escaped his throat, but he made no move to stand. No growl, no defensiveness, just pain, exhaustion, defeat. Clara swallowed hard. "He showed up at our door with a knife wound, Ryan." "I know," he said again, voice gentle. "That's what scares me the most." She turned away for a moment, pacing toward the kitchen doorway and back. The storm outside surged again, a rumble so deep it felt like the ground groaned beneath their feet. The lights dimmed once, twice, but clung to life. Elliot sat cross-legged beside Kai, completely still. The boy's hands were folded in his lap, but his attention never left the dog's face. Every breath Kai took, Elliot matched. Every blink, every shift, the boy absorbed it all as if reading a language no one had ever taught him. "He's not bad," Elliot said softly, without looking up. "He's just scared." Clara froze. The words hit harder than she expected. Too direct, too knowing. She knelt beside her son, brushing back a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "Sweetheart, how do you know that?" Elliot tilted his head, eyes still on Kai. "Because I can feel it." Something about the way he said it, so quiet, so certain, made her throat tighten. It wasn't just the innocence of a child trying to comfort a creature in pain. It was something deeper, as if the fear in Kai's body had flowed directly into the boy's chest and settled there like a second heartbeat. "He's not going to bite me," Elliot added. "He wouldn't hurt anyone." Clara looked at Ryan. His face told her he was wrestling with the same storm in his own chest fear, logic, instinct. But behind it, something else. A memory, maybe, of his own father's German shepherd, of watching a dog guard a family like it was a calling, not a pet, a protector. "We'll call the vet first thing in the morning," Ryan said. "For now, we keep him warm, keep him hydrated. If he makes it through the night, we'll figure out the rest." Clara hesitated. She looked down at the boy and the broken animal beside him, both breathing slow and deep in tandem, like they'd known each other longer than 5 minutes, maybe longer than 5 years. "All right," she said quietly, "but I'm staying up tonight." "I will too," Ryan added. Kai let out a long, slow exhale, as if he understood. The house fell into a strange stillness. Not silence, because the storm still raged and the wind still moaned through the gutters, but a hush, like a cathedral after the last hymn. The fire crackled faintly in the hearth. Shadows danced along the walls, and in that flickering glow, the stranger at their doorstep became something else. Not safe. Not yet. But no longer a stranger. As Ryan turned to grab another blanket, the lights dimmed again. A flicker. Then another. The air felt charged, like the space between lightning and thunder, something not yet unleashed, something waiting. Clara watched them, her husband, her son, and this dog that should have been a threat, but instead brought a strange kind of gravity into the room. Then Elliot spoke again, eyes still on Kai, voice barely more than breath. "He didn't come here to be rescued." Clara turned. "What do you mean, honey?" Elliot finally looked up, his gaze solemn, far too old for 5. He came here because we needed him. Thunder cracked, not outside but in Clara's chest. She didn't understand how Elliot knew. She didn't know what kind of storm they'd let into their home, or why this broken animal looked at her son like he already belonged to him. But somehow, in a way logic couldn't touch, she knew Elliot was right. This wasn't the beginning of something random. It was the return of something that had been waiting. The storm lingered past midnight, not as rage now, but as a slow, sorrowful weep wind curling against the eaves like a lullaby too heavy to sing. Inside the Bennett home, the fireplace glowed low, casting long amber shadows across the living room rug where the stranger rested. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, rain-soaked fur and quiet hope. Clara had tried twice to move Elliot upstairs to bed. Both times the boy refused without defiance, just that quiet, unmovable will she'd only ever seen in people who somehow knew. He wouldn't leave Kai's side. Now, Elliot sat nestled into a mound of blankets on the floor, his little legs tucked beneath him like a curled fox kit. His fingers moved slowly through the shepherd's damp fur, careful not to touch the wound, but brushing just close enough for contact. His small hand, impossibly gentle, traced the ridge behind Kai's ears with a kind of softness that didn't come from being told, but from instinct. "You don't have to be scared anymore," Elliot whispered, his voice barely a breath. "You're home." Clara stood silently in the kitchen doorway, watching. The image was surreal. Her son, her 5-year-old cradling the head of a massive injured dog who should have growled, snapped, recoiled. But Kai didn't. He had not so much as twitched at the child's touch. If anything, he leaned into it. And then it happened again, so subtle Clara almost missed it. A faint thump of tail against the rug, once, then stillness again. She pressed a hand to her lips. Not fear, not even concern anymore, just awe. Ryan came in quietly, drying his hands on a dish towel. He'd just finished cleaning out a mixing bowl to use as a water dish, set beside the blanket with a few soft rags nearby in case of another bleed. He followed Clara's gaze, eyes falling on the boy and the dog now locked in some unspoken rhythm. "He hasn't done that with us," Clara said softly. Ryan nodded. "He's guarding him already." Clara shook her head slightly. "No, Elliot's guarding him." Kai's eyes were open now, half-lidded, glazed with exhaustion, but still tracking Elliot. His chest rose in shallow intervals, breath rasping faintly. But he hadn't moved away once. That kind of trust didn't come easily, not for an animal who'd been hunted. Ryan crouched nearby and gently adjusted the blanket draped over Kai's flank. His gaze drifted to the dog's collar, a thick, scratched-up leather band with a silver tag dull from time. He turned it over, squinting to read the faded letters in the dim light. "K-9 unit," he murmured aloud. "Kai." Clara stepped closer. "Handler, Sergeant A." "Cole?" She exchanged a look with Ryan. "A police dog," she whispered. "Or military," Ryan replied, fingers tightening slightly. "That cut. The way he took it and didn't run. That's not a pet's reaction. That's training." Clara stared at the name again. "Then where's his handler now?" Ryan didn't answer. Neither of them wanted to. Across the room, Elliot leaned down closer, his lips near Kai's ear. "You can sleep. I'll stay right here. Nothing bad will happen." As if on cue, Kai's eyes closed, his breath deepening by a thread. Another slow thump of the tail. Ryan stood up, quietly pulling Clara with him toward the hall. "He'll sleep better if we give them space." "But I know," he said gently. "I'll stay up, keep watch. You rest." She hesitated, then glanced once more at the boy who hadn't blinked since the dog arrived. His posture hadn't changed. Neither had his presence. It was like he'd stepped into a role no one had given him, but that had been waiting for him all along. Clara's voice was quiet as they walked down the hall. "I don't know what this is, Ryan, but it's not normal." "No," he agreed, "it's not." Behind them, in the soft golden glow of the fireplace, Elliot whispered again words no one else could hear, sentences too low for the room to catch. But whatever he said, it worked. Because for the first time since collapsing at their door, Kai slept. And Elliot watched over him, not as a boy watching a dog, but as something older than that. Something shared. Something eternal. The storm would pass by morning, but the thing that had entered their home that night wasn't leaving with the rain. The storm slipped away before dawn, leaving behind a sky the color of damp ash. A soft mist clung to the yard, curled around the fence posts like breath that hadn't quite exhaled. Inside the Bennett home, the world was quiet, too quiet for a house with a child and 100-pound German shepherd under its roof. But not a sound stirred. Elliot slept curled on the rug, one arm thrown gently over Kai's shoulder. The blanket Ryan had wrapped around them had slipped halfway to the floor. Kai's chest rose and fell in slow, even motion, his breath soft, eyes closed. Peaceful. Alive. But in the stillness, something stirred. Not in the room, but behind Elliot's eyes. In the dream, the forest was endless. Trees stretched tall and sharp like spears, their trunks wet with moss and shadow. Light filtered down in dappled patches, too gold, too still. The kind of light that only exists in memory. Elliot stood barefoot in the middle of it all, heart calm, as if he had been there before. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a voice cried out. Not a scream, not even words, just pain. Then a bark, short, sharp, urgent. Elliot turned. Between the trees, a man stumbled forward, dressed in dark green, a badge on his chest. His face was bloodied. His hands grasped at something invisible. His side, maybe, or the weight of time. Behind him came shadows, quick and unformed, like the threat was made of silence itself. Then came the fall. The man hit the ground hard, gasping, eyes wild. And from the trees burst Kai younger, faster, his body coiled with force and fear. He threw himself beside the man, barking with fury at something Elliot couldn't see. He stood guard, teeth bared, as the man tried to lift a hand toward him, and failed. And then, nothing. Stillness. Just the boy, the dog, and a body. And Kai, howling, not out of rage, but grief. When Elliot woke, it was not with a start, but with a sigh. The sun had barely broken over the horizon. The sky beyond the curtains glowed a faint peach, the kind that only lasts for minutes. He sat up slowly, rubbed his eyes, then looked down. Kai was still there, alive, watching. Their eyes met, and Elliot smiled, not like a child waking to a new day, but like someone who understood the weight of what he'd seen. Clara was at the kitchen counter when Elliot walked in, his small feet quiet against the tile. She was pouring coffee, hair tied up, exhaustion still clinging to her shoulders. "Morning, sweetie," she said gently, glancing back. "Did you sleep okay?" Elliot nodded, climbing up into one of the kitchen chairs like it was a normal Saturday. But when he looked at her, there was a calmness in his eyes that startled her. "Mom," he said, "Kai lost his person." Clara froze, coffee pot hovering midair. She turned slowly. "What did you say?" "Kai had someone," Elliot said, like he was explaining something very simple. "But they got hurt. And now he's sad." Her fingers tightened around the handle. "Elliot, who told you that?" He tilted his head. "No one. I saw it." "In a dream?" "Yes." He didn't hesitate. "But it wasn't pretend. It was real." Clara set the coffee pot down with trembling fingers. She crouched beside his chair, brushing her thumb across his cheek. "What did you see, baby?" Elliot looked down at the table for a moment, his voice lower now. "A man in green. He was hurt. Kai barked at the bad things in the trees, but the man didn't get up." Clara's stomach turned cold. "What bad things?" Elliot shrugged. "I don't know. Just bad, like shadows with teeth." She stared at him, unable to speak. Kai limped into the kitchen then, as if summoned not with energy, but with presence. He padded slowly across the tile and rested beside Elliot's chair, pressing his head against the boy's leg. Clara swallowed hard. "Sweetheart," she said quietly, "you know dreams aren't always real, right?" Elliot looked at her, unblinking. "But this one was. Kai was showing me." Clara opened her mouth, but nothing came out. From behind her, Ryan spoke. "He was a K-9. Clara turned. "What?" Ryan held up his phone. "I just did a search on the name from his collar. Sergeant Alan Cole, Millstone PD, killed in the line of duty. 6 months ago." Clara's breath caught. "Do you think—" Ryan nodded slowly. "Kai was his partner." The pieces fell into place like puzzle corners, snapping in, clean, quiet, inevitable. Clara looked down at her son again, her voice barely more than a whisper. "How could you know that, Elliot?" Elliot just reached down and ran his fingers along Kai's ear. The shepherd thumped his tail once, weakly. "He told me," Elliot said. The vet clinic sat at the edge of Millstone's business district, a low building with faded blue siding and an old wind chime that clinked tiredly in the breeze. The parking lot was nearly empty that morning, save for one delivery van and a lone minivan with fogged windows. The sky overhead was still gray, carrying the scent of soaked soil and leftover thunder. Inside, the waiting room smelled like antiseptic, coffee, and quiet tension. Clara sat hunched forward on the vinyl bench, hands clenched in her lap. Ryan paced near the door, glancing at his watch, even though they were on time. But it was Elliot who drew every eye. The little boy sat cross-legged on the floor beside the exam table, one hand resting lightly on Kai's paw. He didn't speak. He didn't squirm. He just watched, his gaze fixed on Kai's face the entire time the dog was lifted onto the table. Kai didn't resist. He hadn't since the moment they walked in. Even the vet tech, a woman named Haley with calm hands and a cautious smile, noted it out loud. "That's rare, especially for one this big and this hurt." Dr. Margaret Rosen entered minutes later, late 50s, crisp navy scrubs, a lanyard with pins of cartoon dogs, but a face that rarely smiled. She greeted them with a nod, but her eyes were already scanning Kai from nose to tail. "How long has he been like this?" she asked. "Found him last night, on our porch," Ryan said. "Injuries?" Ryan nodded. "Deep cut along the side. We cleaned it up best we could. No other visible wounds. But he's underweight, and we think he's been on his own for a while." Dr. Rosen slipped on gloves and leaned over Kai. "Let's take a look." Clara's breath caught when the bandage was peeled back. The wound had looked bad in the dim light of their living room. Under fluorescent bulbs, it looked worse. The skin around it was darkened, inflamed. The gash was deep, but the edges too precise, too straight. Dr. Rosen leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "This wasn't an accident," she said flatly. "What do you mean?" Clara asked. The vet grabbed a cotton swab and gently dabbed at the skin. Kai winced, but didn't growl. "This wasn't barbed wire or a branch or another animal. This is a blade wound, clean, intentional, maybe 4 inches long." Clara's throat tightened. "So, someone stabbed him?" Dr. Rosen didn't answer right away. She moved to Kai's neck, gently pressing the scanner against his fur. A faint beep. She frowned, tried again and again. "Is there a chip?" Ryan asked. "Yes, but it's not reading properly. Might be damaged or encrypted." She moved to her desk and connected the scanner to her computer. Elliot hadn't moved. Still sitting by Kai's side, his small fingers gently running over the fur between the dog's toes. "He was trying to protect someone," Elliot said suddenly, without looking up. Everyone in the room turned. Clara's voice was gentle. "What makes you say that?" "I just know." Dr. Rosen looked up from the screen. "He's right." Clara blinked. "Sorry?" The vet turned the monitor toward them. The tag on his collar was mostly intact. But his chip data, what little I could pull, confirmed it. This dog's full designation is K9 Unit, registered to a Sergeant Alan Cole, deceased 6 months ago in the line of duty. The chip hasn't updated since then. Ryan exhaled. "So he was a police dog." Dr. Rosen nodded. "And a damn good one, I'd guess. Look at this build. His reflexes. Even injured, his vitals are steady. Whatever he's been through, he's held it together. That kind of discipline doesn't come from pets. That comes from service." Clara's voice trembled. "And the wound?" Dr. Rosen paused, folding her hands. "Someone knew what they were doing, and they wanted him gone." Silence fell over the room like a shroud. Clara stared at the floor, a cold heaviness blooming in her chest. Ryan's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing as pieces began to shift into place. But Elliot didn't react with fear. He simply leaned forward, rested his head against Kai's shoulder, and whispered something only the dog could hear. Kai shifted. His ears twitched. Then, thump. The soft sound of his tail, slow but sure, against the metal table. Dr. Rosen blinked. "Well, I'll be damned." Clara stepped forward, laying a hand on her son's back. "What did you say to him, baby?" Elliot looked up, eyes clear, voice soft. "I told him we'd keep him safe." The night was thick with silence, the kind that pressed against the walls like fog. Rain had passed, but the air still carried the weight of it, heavy and damp. The Bennett home lay quiet, its windows dark, its hallways still. Somewhere in the distance, a barn owl called once and then fell silent again. In the small bedroom at the end of the hall, Elliot stirred. His eyes opened slowly, not startled, not afraid, just aware. He sat up without a sound, the bedsheet slipping from his shoulders in a soft hush. Moonlight filtered through the curtain, casting silver lines across the floor. For a moment, he just sat there, listening to something only he could hear. Then he stood, his bare feet quiet against the wooden floorboards. He walked to the window, hands at his sides, eyes wide but calm, and then he whispered, almost to himself, "He's back." The words didn't echo. They just hung in the air like frost. Down the hall, Clara stirred in her sleep. She didn't know what had woken her. The faint creak of the floor, maybe, or the sudden stillness in the house. A mother's instinct is never truly at rest. She slipped from bed and padded down the hall, peering into her son's room. He was standing at the window, unmoving. "Elliot?" she asked gently, brushing her robe tighter around her. "What are you doing up, honey?" Elliot didn't turn. "I saw him." Clara moved closer, kneeling beside him. "Who?" Elliot pointed through the glass toward the backyard. "By the fence, same as before." Clara's breath caught. "What do you mean, same as before?" But before he could answer, a sound rumbled from the hallway. Low, guttural. Not loud, but unmistakable. Kai. Clara turned as the shepherd appeared at the doorway, his body tense. The hairs along his spine stood like bristles, his tail low but rigid. His eyes, still tired, still healing, were focused like a sniper's, locked on the window where Elliot stood. A sound rose from deep in Kai's throat, a growl not of fear, but of warning. Clara stood, her pulse quickening. "What is it, boy?" Kai padded forward slowly, placing himself between Elliot and the glass. His body shielding the child like instinct alone drove him. He didn't bark. He didn't charge. He just stood firm, the kind of still that comes from wolves, not pets. Clara leaned over and looked out the window. The yard beyond shimmered with dew. Trees lined the fence, tall and bare, their branches like twisted fingers reaching toward the moon. At first she saw nothing. And then, movement, a flicker of shadow. A tall figure, too tall to be a neighbor's kid, too still to be just passing by, hovered near the fence line. Not walking, not running, watching. Clara felt her heart crawl into her throat. She stepped back from the window. "Ryan!" she called sharply, louder than she meant. "Ryan, get up!" Kai let out a sharper growl now, stepping forward, teeth slightly bared. Elliot moved beside him, unafraid. His hand reached down, brushing the dog's fur. "He doesn't want Kai here," he said softly. "He's looking for him." Clara turned to her son, shaken. "What are you talking about?" But Elliot just looked at the fence again. He's been watching. Footsteps thundered down the hallway as Ryan appeared, disoriented but alert. "What's going on?" Clara pointed toward the window. "Someone's out there." Ryan moved quickly, peering through the glass. The figure was gone. Only the rustling branches remained, swaying in a breeze that hadn't existed minutes ago. Ryan cursed under his breath. "You sure you saw someone?" Clara nodded. "Tall, dark clothes, just standing there." Kai stepped closer to the door now, pacing. The tension in his body hadn't left. If anything, it had deepened. He was trained for this. Every part of him understood danger. Even wounded, he knew how to measure it. Ryan turned to Clara. "I'll check the yard." "No!" Clara grabbed his wrist. "We don't know who it is. Don't be stupid." Ryan hesitated, then slowly nodded. "We'll call the sheriff. Have them patrol." Kai stopped pacing, standing now beside Elliot again. The boy leaned into him, resting his hand on the dog's back like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Why is he watching us?" Clara whispered. No one answered. But Kai's growl, now almost inaudible, seemed to fill the silence for them. It wasn't random. It was something else. A warning. A challenge. A beginning. The back door slammed shut behind Ryan as he stepped barefoot onto the wet porch, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the yard like a blade, sweeping over the grass, the trees, the fence. "Kai, come," he whispered sharply. The German shepherd was already moving, a blur of fur and muscle, low to the ground and utterly silent. There was no hesitation in him, no limp. The pain of recovery was buried now beneath something older instinct. Clara's voice called faintly from inside. "Be careful." But Ryan didn't look back. He was already following Kai, who had broken into a near run toward the back fence. The night air was sharp and clean, but it carried something else: sweat, metal, movement. And Kai smelled it all. They reached the edge of the yard. The beam from Ryan's flashlight flicked along the fence line and froze. Footprints. Fresh, deep in the mud. Size 11, maybe 12. Heavier than average. Heading toward the trees, but not in a straight line. Whoever it was had stopped here. Waited. Watched. Ryan stepped closer, crouching, next to the footprints. A smear. Dark, rust-colored. Not quite fresh, but recent enough. Blood. "Kai," Ryan muttered, voice tightening. It's just like you're—" He trailed off as Kai growled again, ears forward. The dog bolted toward the corner of the yard, following the scent. Ryan ran after him, the light from the flashlight bobbing wildly in his hand. They crossed the property line into the neighbor's yard, Mrs. Dorsey's place. She was a widow, mid-60s, lived alone. Her porch light was off, no signs of movement. And then they saw it. Her kitchen window shattered, glass glimmered on the flower bed beneath it like frost in the moonlight. "Jesus," Ryan breathed. Kai stood stiff, his chest rising and falling rapidly, eyes locked on the broken window. Ryan pulled out his phone, already dialing 911. "Yeah, it's Ryan Bennett on Sycamore Lane," he said, breath short. "We've got a break-in. Back window at my neighbor's place, Dorsey residence. Saw someone in our yard just minutes before. And we found blood. Human. He's on foot, possibly armed." The dispatcher responded, calm but urgent. "Officers are en route. Stay clear of the scene. Can you confirm if anyone is inside the residence?" Ryan glanced at Kai. The dog had not moved. He was still, but every part of him vibrated with alertness. It was as if he was waiting for something to move, something he could stop. "I don't think anyone's inside," Ryan said carefully. "But I'm not going in to check. I've got my son and wife at home, and this dog is—" He paused, eyes falling to the ground beneath the window. Another drop of blood, this one fresher. Kai sniffed once, then turned, not toward the house, but toward the woods behind it. Whoever it was, they were gone, but not far, and not done. Back at the house, Clara had locked every window and door. Elliot sat cross-legged on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide but calm. He wasn't crying, wasn't shaking, just listening. When Ryan and Kai returned, mud on their shoes, flashlight dimming, Elliot looked up and said softly, "You didn't catch him." Ryan exchanged a glance with Clara, then crouched in front of his son. "Nobody, but we saw him, and we called the police. They're looking now." Elliot nodded once. "He's still close." Ryan froze. "What?" Elliot's eyes didn't waver. He looked at Kai, who had returned to his spot beside the couch, flanks heaving but eyes bright. "He's looking for Kai, but Kai won't run this time." The words landed with more weight than a child's voice should have been able to carry. Clara sank onto the armrest. "How do you know that, Elliot?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, resting his hand on Kai's paw. Kai let out a low breath and closed his eyes, not out of exhaustion, but something else, something that felt like agreement. Outside, the sirens wailed low in the distance, their sound cutting across the quiet street. But inside, a different truth had settled, one not born from evidence but from connection, the kind that doesn't need words, the kind that waits in the dark and chooses not to run anymore. The kitchen smelled like toast and rain. Morning light spilled in through the window, soft and gray, diffused by low clouds and lingering mist. Outside, the storm had passed, but the world still felt heavy, like it hadn't quite decided whether to exhale or hold its breath. Clara moved quietly around the kitchen, sliding scrambled eggs onto 3 plates. Her eyes were puffy from lack of sleep, and every sound felt a bit too sharp, like the world had been tuned just a little off. Elliot sat at the breakfast table, legs swinging, his back straight as if waiting for something, or someone. Kai lay near the sliding glass door, gaze fixed on the tree line beyond the yard. His breathing had evened out overnight, but his ears were still sharp, shifting slightly with every creak of wood or movement outside. "Still watching," Ryan muttered, pouring coffee. "That dog doesn't sleep unless the boy does." Clara said nothing. She couldn't shake the image from last night, the broken window, the blood, the figure in the dark, and Elliot's calm voice saying what no one else dared. She slid a plate toward her son. "Eat a little, sweetie." Elliot didn't respond. He was already drawing. Crayons scattered across the table like fragments of a dream he was trying to stitch back together. A thick blue line became a floor, a brown square wood, a dark space underneath, then something smaller, gray, like a box. Next came Kai, meticulously drawn with all 4 legs, ears alert, eyes bright. And beside him, a man, tall, uniformed, unfinished. Clara slowly moved to his side, kneeling. "What are you drawing?" Elliot didn't look up. "What Kai showed me." She stared at the image, unsettled. "In your dream?" He nodded, adding faint red lines to the man's chest slashes of color that looked too intentional for a 5-year-old. "He was hurt." Kai barked. "But he didn't leave." Clara swallowed hard. "And the box?" Elliot tapped it twice with his crayon. "Under the floor, where the wood creaks." Ryan stepped closer, frowning. "What floor, buddy?" Elliot looked up, finally meeting their eyes. "Not here. The other house. The one with the pine trees, where Kai took us in the dream." Clara blinked. "There's no house in the pines." "Yes, there is," Elliot said simply. "It's real. The man lived there." Kai stood. It was sudden, smooth, controlled, deliberate. He walked toward the table and stopped beside Elliot, placing himself between the boy and the back door like a sentinel. His eyes shifted to the drawing, then to Clara. A low chuff escaped him, not a bark, not a growl, a sound of recognition. Clara sat back slowly, knees trembling. She couldn't explain the feeling building in her chest, a mixture of dread and awe. She looked again at the picture, then at Kai, whose gaze hadn't left her. "Ryan," she said softly, voice catching. "That house he's talking about, I think I know it." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Clara stood, walking to the kitchen drawer. She pulled out a stack of mail and dug through until she found what she was looking for, an old real estate flyer from months ago. She laid it on the table. A photo, a single-story, pine-shrouded property. Front steps worn with time, shutters faded, but the outline unmistakable. "That's the Walker house," Clara whispered. "Henry Walker, old war vet. He passed away last winter. It's been empty ever since." Ryan looked at the picture, then back at the drawing. The match was chilling. Clara felt her hands trembling as she picked up the crayon sketch again. "You've never been there, Elliot. How could you know what it looks like?" Elliot didn't answer. He returned to his eggs as if the world hadn't just cracked open beneath them. Ryan looked at Kai, who had laid down again, but remained watchful. "Clara, if the dream is real, if the box is real—" Clara shook her head slowly, finishing his thought. "Then someone wanted it buried, and Kai brought it back. A truth hidden beneath floorboards. A memory locked in fur and fear. A boy who saw not with eyes, but with something deeper. They didn't know what was in that box, but they knew somehow, without question, it mattered. And someone else knew that too. The night had a pulse. It wasn't loud, not the boom of thunder or the roar of wind, but quiet and steady, like a distant drumbeat only certain hearts could hear. The Bennett house sat under a sky of deep indigo, stars hidden behind shifting clouds. Street lamps flickered, humming like they were trying to speak. And Kai stood at the door, motionless, poised. His nose twitched once, catching something in the air, a scent no human would notice. But to him, it was memory, direction, a call. Ryan opened the door, still lacing his boots. "You sure about this, boy?" Kai looked back once, then turned, stepping off the porch and into the streetlight's edge. Clara hesitated. "It's almost midnight." "But he waited for the right time," Elliot said, already wrapped in his jacket, hand clutching his sketchbook. "He said it had to be tonight." No one questioned how Elliot knew. They didn't anymore. So they followed. Sidewalks glistened from the earlier rain, reflecting the family in fragments as they walked behind the silent German shepherd. His gait was slower than it had been days ago, but purposeful, like his body still remembered what it meant to lead, even if it ached in every step. They passed sleeping houses with drawn curtains and quiet fences. At each intersection, Kai paused, scenting, listening, then continued. The town felt different at night, not unsafe, but unveiled, like it no longer wore its daily mask of normal. Clara kept close to Elliot, one hand on his shoulder. Her other gripped the flashlight, though she didn't turn it on. Something about the dark felt sacred now. After 15 minutes, they left the pavement. Kai stepped off the sidewalk and into a narrow gravel path that curved behind a line of pine trees. Branches above swayed gently, whispering in a language older than anyone remembered. Clara blinked at the trail ahead. Her voice broke the silence, soft and distant. "I know this road." Ryan glanced over. "You do?" She nodded. "We brought food here once, during the holidays. He didn't want much company, but Henry Walker always accepted a pie." Elliot whispered, "This is it. The place from the drawing." The pines thickened and the air grew still. And then, just beyond the clearing, the house emerged. Gray siding curled at the corners, The roof sagged. Porch rails hung loose like crooked teeth. But the bones of it remained, and it was exactly as Elliot had drawn. Kai slowed as they neared the steps. He looked over his shoulder, making eye contact with Clara first, then Ryan. Then he climbed them, one by one. Ryan reached the door and tested the knob. Locked. "We're not breaking in," a low growl. Kai stood at the threshold, paw resting against the frame, tail stiff. The sound wasn't a threat. It was urgency. A memory resurfaced. "He wants us to go in," Elliot said. "He remembers." Ryan ran a hand over his face, looking at the rotting wood. "We'll call someone first. The cops, maybe." "There's no time," Clara said, startling even herself. "If someone's looking for this place. If someone's been here already." They didn't need to finish the sentence, because the house didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, like something inside had held its breath for months, waiting to be seen again. Ryan pulled out a thin piece of metal from his pocket, a leftover from his old locksmithing days, and jimmied the door. It gave with a soft click. Kai entered first. The air inside was stale but not foul, just untouched. Furniture sat under white sheets. A clock on the wall had stopped at 2:13. Dust hung in narrow beams of moonlight cutting through broken blinds. Elliot stepped in behind Kai, holding his breath. "I've seen this room," he whispered. "In my dream." Ryan scanned the living room. No sign of forced entry. Yet. Clara's flashlight flicked on. The beam swept across faded wallpaper and a wall of medals. Framed black and white photos showed a younger Henry Walker, standing beside fellow soldiers, one hand resting on the head of a dog. Kai turned sharply and padded into the hallway. They followed him down a corridor that narrowed into a back room. The floor creaked, and then he stopped. Ears perked, nose low, paw scratching once, then again against a square of wooden floor that didn't quite match the rest, just like in Elliot's drawing. Elliot stepped forward and knelt, fingers brushing the spot. "It's here," he whispered. He found it again. Ryan crouched beside him, heart hammering. He pressed lightly. The wood gave just slightly loose. He reached for his pocket knife. The silence cracked first, not with thunder, not with words, but with the sound of splintering wood, sharp, sudden, and unmistakably human. Ryan jerked upright, still crouched by the loosened floorboard. The knife clattered from his hand. Clara spun toward the front of the house, flashlight beam trembling. Kai froze. Then he growled low, guttural, primal. It wasn't the warning growl of before. This one came from someplace deeper, not fear, not pain, recognition. Clara grabbed Elliot by the shoulders, pulling him close. "Stay behind me," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rise of Kai's snarl. Another crash closer now. A door pushed open. Footsteps. Heavy. Determined. Ryan stood slowly, his body tense like a wire drawn taut. "Someone's in here," he whispered, as if saying it louder would make it more real. His hand reached back instinctively to steady Kai, but the dog was no longer beside him. He was already moving. "Kai, no!" Too late. The German shepherd burst down the hallway with a velocity that belied his injuries. His nails scraped against the hardwood as he turned the corner and disappeared from sight. A bark erupted feral, piercing, and then came the sounds. A body slamming into something hard, a muffled grunt, the shatter of glass, the thud of furniture overturned. Then silence. "Stay here," Ryan ordered Clara and Elliot, and without another word he dashed after the dog. The hallway seemed to stretch as he ran, his own footsteps drowned by the pounding in his chest. When he reached the living room, the scene, looked like a whirlwind had torn through. One of the front windows was shattered. Glass littered the floor. A lamp lay broken, flickering its final strobe against the wall. Kai stood in the middle of it all, chest heaving, teeth bared, his body between the intruder and the rest of the house. And the man? Tall, thin, face half-shadowed beneath a hood, clothes dark, soaked from rain. One arm was raised in defense, the other clutching something metal crowbar? Flashlight? Weapon? He didn't speak. He didn't have to, because his eyes said everything. Not fear, not confusion, fury. He lunged. Ryan barely had time to react. Kai surged forward again, knocking into the man's legs with bone-jarring force. They both hit the floor with a crash. Ryan heard the wind leave the man's lungs, heard Kai's growl turn into a bark so sharp it split the air like lightning. The intruder rolled, elbowed Kai hard in the ribs, and scrambled toward the window. "Kai, back!" Ryan shouted. But the shepherd didn't move. He stood his ground. The man dragged himself to his feet, breathing hard. Blood stained his sleeve from where Kai had caught him. He took one last look toward the hallway, toward whatever he had been after, and then launched himself through the shattered window into the night. Ryan rushed forward, barely missing the fleeing figure as he vanished into the dark. The bushes outside rustled, then fell still. Only Kai remained in motion, spinning once in place, eyes searching, nostrils flared. And then he limped to Ryan's side, as if apologizing for not catching him. Clara appeared seconds later, holding Elliot tight in her arms. "What happened?" she gasped. Ryan shook his head, scanning the room. He knew the house. He didn't hesitate. He went for the front study first. He was looking for something. Clara turned her gaze to Kai, and Kai stopped him. Elliot stepped forward, breaking from Clara's arms. He knelt beside Kai, wrapping his arms around the dog's thick neck. "You remembered the place," he whispered. "But he remembered you too, didn't he?" Kai didn't bark, didn't move, but his tail gave a slow, deliberate thump. Ryan's eyes dropped to the floor, to the shards of glass, the trail of blood that led to the window, and something else, a patch. It had been torn from the intruder's sleeve in the scuffle, now lying like a discarded lie in the dust. He picked it up carefully. The emblem was faded, threads frayed. But the outline was clear. An eagle, a badge, letters just barely legible in the lamplight. "Cole's old task force," Ryan said slowly, holding it up. "This guy wasn't random." Clara blinked. "He was one of them." "And now he's covering tracks." They stood in silence for a beat. The weight of the room pressed down again. The ghosts were returning, not from beyond, but from memory, from buried secrets clawing their way back into light. Ryan turned back to the hallway. "We need to open that floor." The quiet that settled after the intruder fled wasn't peace. It was pressure, like the air was holding its breath, like the house itself remembered too much. Kai stood still near the hallway, his flank rising and falling with each breath. Blood from the reopened wound on his side trailed down his leg, but he didn't whimper. His eyes stayed locked on a spot just beneath the warped rug, the same spot he had scratched at before the attack. Ryan moved first. He yanked the rug back with one pull, exposing a floorboard slightly looser than the rest. The wood was weathered, grooves clawed into it, old and new, layered like time trying to tell a story. Ryan reached for his pocket knife and wedged the blade beneath the slat. It resisted, then gave with a soft creak. The wood lifted. A smell rose dust, oil, age. Underneath, a compartment, no bigger than a shoebox, carefully crafted, lined with a torn scrap of dark cloth that looked like part of an old uniform. Inside it sat a box, plain, metal, cold. Ryan swallowed. He lifted it slowly, as if afraid it might vanish or explode. The weight of it startled him. It wasn't just the physical heaviness, it was what it might hold. Clara's voice broke the moment. "Is that what he came for?" Ryan nodded. "It has to be." The front door burst open behind them, the red and blue wash of lights flickering against the hallway walls. Police voices filled the air. "Clear left! Move right! We've got entry!" Clara raised both hands instinctively. "We called. He's gone." Two officers swept in, followed by a third figure in a rain-soaked jacket, Dr. Morgan, the vet who'd treated Kai days ago. "What the hell's going on?" the lead officer barked. Ryan stood holding the box in both hands. "We were followed. There was a break-in. That man, he was looking for this." One officer stepped toward the floorboard. "What is that?" Before Ryan could answer, Dr. Morgan gasped. His eyes were locked on Kai, who had stepped into the hallway now, limping slightly. "Kai?" He knelt slowly, disbelieving. That's Kai. K-9 unit out of Mason Ridge. Partnered with Sergeant Alan Cole." Ryan blinked. "You know him?" "I treated him once during an op. Emergency bullet extraction. Strongest dog I'd ever seen. He went missing the night Cole died." Clara stepped forward, the words catching in her throat. "Alan Cole. That name was on the collar tag." The officer flipped open his notepad. "Sergeant, Cole died in a forest ambush almost 6 months ago. Case closed. Friendly fire, they said." Ryan exchanged a look with Clara, then down at the box. "Maybe not so friendly." Dr. Morgan approached the compartment under the floor. "If Kai led you here, he was looking for something, or protecting something." Ryan knelt and opened the box. Silence stretched. Inside, neatly folded and protected in wax paper, were photographs, typed notes, coordinates. Some pages were marked in red ink. Others had signatures, some clearly forged. And tucked into the corner was a small flash drive, sealed with tape, marked only with a date. "Good God," the officer whispered. "Evidence," Clara said, her voice trembling. "That's why they wanted him gone. Why they stabbed him. Why he ran." Kai stepped beside Ryan, looking not at the box, but at the empty hallway where the intruder had disappeared into the night. "He didn't run to escape," Ryan said. "He ran to find someone who would listen." The officer turned to Dr. Morgan. "Can you confirm his ID?" Morgan nodded, pulling out his scanner and approaching Kai slowly, gently. He waved it over the side of the shepherd's neck. A beep, then a pause. "Microchip's damaged, but the serial still pings. It's Kai, no doubt." Kai didn't move. His tail gave a single, soft wag. The officer looked down at the box again. "This is going to blow open a sealed investigation." Ryan closed the lid slowly. "Then it needs to." They stepped out of the ruined house together, the wind rising behind them. In the distance, thunder rolled like the memory of something that had tried to stay buried. Clara lifted Elliot into her arms as he stared at Kai, who walked beside them with a limp, but also with purpose. "Is he okay?" Elliot asked quietly. Clara brushed his hair back. "He's tired, baby." But he did what he came here to do. Elliot laid his head on her shoulder. He still misses his person. Clara blinked fast, fighting the weight in her chest. And as they stepped onto the porch and into the flashing light of police cruisers, Ryan placed a hand on Kai's back. "You kept the truth safe," he whispered. "Now we make sure the world hears it." The box sat in the center of the kitchen table like it didn't belong there, like it belonged somewhere darker, deeper, hidden beneath the weight of silence. Ryan unlatched the metal lid slowly. A faint click echoed through the quiet house. Clara stood behind him, arms folded tightly, eyes fixed. Elliot sat at the far end of the table, his cereal untouched, Kai lying at his feet with his chin resting over crossed paws. His eyes didn't blink. He was watching, too. Inside the box, neatly stacked files, edges curled, yellowed slightly. A handful of photographs bound with a rubber band. Several cassette tapes labeled with initials and dates. And the flash drive. Ryan reached for the top file. It creaked when opened, like something exhaled. The name printed across the first page stopped him cold. Sergeant Alan Cole. Internal notes. Ryan read aloud, voice low. Observed inconsistencies in cargo manifest deliveries between July 3rd and September 8th. Suspect tampering at warehouse site 41B. Internal approval signatures missing or forged. Request denied to escalate to federal. He turned the page. Contacted Lieutenant Garrison, advised to drop investigation for safety. Continuing off-record surveillance. Partner K9 Kai maintains heightened alert during recon. Noted increased tailing activity on return trips. Clara stepped closer. He was being watched. Ryan nodded. By his own department. He sifted through the next few sheets, his face tightening with every line. The deeper the documents went, the clearer the picture became. Alan Cole hadn't just been a patrol officer. He had been digging into something festering inside their own precinct. Smuggling routes rerouted through legitimate shipping manifests. Tampered evidence lockers. Cases dismissed without trial. Someone was tying off loose ends, and Alan had gotten too close. The last page was dated 3 days before his death. A single line, handwritten in red ink. "If anything happens to me, look at Langley." Ryan stared at it for a long time. "Langley," he murmured. "That's the man who broke in. Victor Langley." Clara leaned over his shoulder, eyes wide. "But I thought he was dismissed years ago." "Apparently not from memory," Ryan said darkly. He picked up the next item, an envelope. Inside were photographs. Blurred night-shot images of license plates, unregistered trucks parked behind a storage facility. Men moving crates at 2 a.m., faces barely visible under hooded sweatshirts. Then one photograph made Clara gasp. She grabbed it from Ryan's hand. It showed a man with his back to the camera. A jacket marked with the department insignia. A silhouette she'd seen before. "That's from the other night," she whispered. "The man at Henry Walker's house? That's him." Ryan looked closer. Same build. Same patch. He flipped the photo over. Scribbled in the corner in uneven ink. "Caught twice. Always watching," Clara's voice cracked. "He didn't just die in action. He was silenced." The air in the kitchen turned heavy. Kai rose slowly to his feet, pacing once around the table. His gaze never left the box. Elliot, small and quiet, finally spoke. "He wasn't scared," the boy said. "In the dream, he wasn't scared when it happened." Ryan looked up. "Alan?" Elliot nodded. "He told Kai to stay hidden, to run. But Kai didn't. He stayed. Even after... He trailed off, swallowing. Clara walked to him, kneeling. "Elliot, how do you know that?" The boy touched the top of Kai's head gently. "I just know." Kai leaned into the touch like it was the only thing grounding him. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "It's like he remembers." Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "Then maybe everything we need to know isn't just on paper." He opened another folder, this one marked Recovered Audio 729. A small cassette inside. No transcription. Ryan held it up, brows furrowed. "We'll need a player." "I have one," Clara said. "My dad's old Walkman still works." "I'll hook up the flash drive too," Ryan added. "If there's surveillance on there, it could change everything." But Kai didn't look at the electronics. He walked to the front window and stood still, ears up, body tense, always watching. Ryan looked toward him. He didn't run away after Alan's death. He was running with something. With this box. This truth. Clara's hands tightened around the photo. They thought killing Alan would bury it. But they didn't count on Kai. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves. Something in it sounded almost like breath-like memory. Clara placed a hand on the box. "We owe it to both of them," she said, "to finish what he started." And at their feet, the dog, who wouldn't forget, who wouldn't leave, watched the horizon, as if still waiting for the one who never came home. The knock on the door came at 7:14 a.m., sharp, deliberate, too early to be casual. Clara flinched as she poured coffee, the cup trembling slightly in her hand. Ryan opened the door to reveal a pair of officers, one in uniform, the other in a dark windbreaker with Detective S. Wyatt on the chest. "Mr. Bennett?" the detective asked. Ryan nodded. "What is it?" "We ran prints from the scene at the Walker house. Partial match confirmed from a thumbprint on the window pane. Do you know who he is?" The detective's jaw tightened. "Victor Langley." Ryan's breath caught. "He was on the files. Sergeant Cole wrote his name, warned about him." "Then you'll understand why this is complicated," the detective said grimly, stepping inside. Kai appeared in the hallway, ears forward, body rigid. Wyatt's eyes flicked down. "That the dog?" Clara stepped protectively in front of Kai. "His name is Kai." The detective gave a small nod, his voice quieter now. "We pulled Langley's records. Former officer. Served 13 years. Commendations early on. Then, things shifted. 3 complaints filed in his last year. Evidence tampering, excessive force. A tip about stolen confiscation assets. But before IA could act, he took a medical leave and disappeared." Ryan glanced at Clara. "So why now?" "Because," Wyatt said, pulling out a file, "he's tied to everything Sergeant Alan Cole was investigating. Storage logs, black shipments. We've got a map that matches nearly a dozen of Cole's notes." He laid the map on their kitchen table. Marked in red ink were transport routes between small coastal towns, back doors through which weapons, narcotics, and stolen property were moved like clockwork under the radar of even the most diligent precincts. "But Cole's trail went cold after he died," Wyatt continued. "Until now." Clara looked down at Kai, who hadn't moved from his position. "Because Kai didn't forget." The detective nodded slowly. "Which makes him not just a witness, but a target." Silence. Ryan leaned over the map. "So Langley broke in because of the files. But why now, after all these years?" Wyatt's voice dropped. Because we've reopened the case. Quietly, off the books, and someone tipped him off. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. You mean someone inside? Wyatt didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Ryan sat down, rubbing his face. Langley thinks if he gets the dog, the story dies. He's not after just a dog, Wyatt said, pulling out a grainy surveillance photo. He's after a witness that can't be bribed, threatened, or manipulated. The image showed Langley, caught on camera near a storage unit. The timestamp matched the night Kai collapsed on their porch. He followed him, Clara whispered. From wherever Kai ran? He's been tracking him ever since Cole went missing, Wyatt said. And your son Elliot is now part of the trail. That changed the air in the room. Everything tightened. Ryan stood up. Then we'll need protection. Wyatt nodded. I'll assign a patrol car for now, but I have to ask, do you have anything else? Any other documents from that box that didn't make it to the evidence room? Ryan and Clara exchanged a glance. Elliot had gone quiet, sitting on the stairs, his drawing pad on his knees. There was a flash drive, Ryan said. We haven't opened it yet. Wyatt raised an eyebrow. Mind if I take a look? Ryan retrieved it from the drawer and plugged it into his laptop. The screen flickered, then loaded a folder labeled Alpha, Cole, Final. Inside, image files, text documents, one video. Ryan opened the video. It was night vision, blurry, but clear enough. Alan Cole's voice came through, faint but steady. This is Cole. I'm recording this in case I don't make it out. I believe Victor Langley is involved in the disappearance of evidence from Locker 7G. I've attempted to flag this to command, but my reports have been buried. Tonight I'll be following up personally. If anything happens, check the transport logs from July 9th. Kai knows the route. The camera shifted, showing Kai's silhouette in the corner, alert, waiting, then static, then black. Wyatt exhaled. That's a deathbed testimony, even if unofficial. Ryan shut the lid gently. So, what now? Wyatt paused. Now, we bring it forward. We reopen Alan Cole's case formally, but quietly. If Langley finds out we're building a case from this, he'll come back. Clara looked toward the window. Rain had started again, tapping gently like nervous fingers. Kai stood beside Elliot now, who was gently stroking his neck. He's not just after evidence, Clara whispered. He's after what's left of Cole's legacy. And he'll try again, Wyatt said. That much we know. Elliot looked up at them. He already knows we have Kai, the boy said quietly. But Kai's not afraid. Wyatt tilted his head. How do you know that? Elliot looked down at his drawing Kai standing in front of him, tail stiff, eyes clear, the shadow behind them tall and menacing. Because he told me. And for a second, no one questioned the boy. Because somehow they knew Kai already remembered everything. And now, so did they. The house was still, the kind of stillness that settles just before dawn, when shadows stretch long and sleep turns fragile. Rain whispered on the roof like old grief, soft but unrelenting. Elliot stirred beneath his blanket. His eyes moved rapidly under closed lids, his breath shallow, small fists curled close to his chest. Kai lay at the foot of his bed, one ear flicking like he too could feel the dream coming. Then it began, not with words but with feeling, A forest dark, wet moonlight slicing through the canopy in pale ribbons, the smell of pine and blood and something wrong. A figure in uniform staggered forward, breathing hard, hand pressed against his side. Behind him, a shape moved with purpose, sharp, silent, a glint of metal. Alan Cole. He turned. There was no time. The blade sank deep, once, twice. Kai lunged from the shadows, teeth bared, but the attacker vanished into the trees. Alan dropped to his knees, and then to the ground. The world tilted, and the dream shattered. Elliot bolted upright in bed, sweat clinging to his forehead, eyes wide, mouth open but soundless for a beat. Then he whispered, "It was in the forest. He didn't run. He stayed." Kai rose from the foot of the bed without a sound, moving to Elliot's side, nuzzling his arm gently, as if to say, "You saw it too." Downstairs, Clara stirred. Something in her mother's instinct or something deeper drew her from sleep. She padded up the stairs, peered into Elliot's room, and saw her son sitting on the edge of his bed, wide awake, speaking softly to the dog. "Kai didn't run. He waited." "He stayed even after it hurt." Her breath caught. "Elliot?" The boy turned to her, eyes still fogged with whatever had just passed through him. "He saw it. I saw it. It was behind a tree. The man with the knife." Clara stepped forward slowly. "Elliot, how do you know that?" The boy pointed to his head, then gently to Kai. "He remembers. And now I do too." She sat beside him, her heart racing. "Are you saying you dreamed Kai's memory?" He nodded, eyes clear now. "The man wore a badge, but it was bad. It smelled like metal and smoke and lies." Clara's voice trembled. "Honey, was it the same dream as before?" Elliot shook his head. "No. It went further this time. I saw the knife. I saw the way Kai barked, but didn't chase. He stayed with his person, even after he died." Downstairs, Ryan stood in the hallway, frozen. He'd heard the entire thing. They didn't speak of telepathy, or mysticism, or anything they couldn't define. But in that moment, the impossible felt real. Kai padded toward Ryan, looked up, eyes dark, unwavering. Ryan whispered almost to himself. "He didn't run." Clara stood now, her voice barely above a breath. "He saw it happen. He stayed beside him, in the forest, until someone came for him, until someone tried to silence him." Elliot tugged gently on her sleeve. "That's why he ran here. He didn't forget. He was looking for a way to tell someone." "And you're that someone," Ryan said, looking at his son in a way he never had before. Clara looked at the clock. 4:47 a.m. "I'll call Wyatt." They all sat in silence as the sky began to lighten beyond the windows. In the growing hush, Elliot laid his hand gently on Kai's back. The dog didn't move, but his breathing slowed to match the boy's. Like they were one heartbeat, split in two, Clara knelt beside them. "We'll help you finish this, for Alan, for what they tried to hide." Ryan added quietly, "And for the truth that no one believed a dog could carry." Elliot smiled softly. He never let go, even when the world did. Kai let out a low exhale and rested his head in the boy's lap. And somewhere in the silence between them all, the forest still whispered, the memory still breathed. The morning fog hadn't lifted yet, and neither had the weight in Clara's chest. She stood at the window, coffee cooling, watching Ryan crouch by the SUV. His jaw was clenched, fingers streaked with grease as he inspected the brake line. "Kai started barking the second I hit the ignition," Ryan had said. Now he knew why. The brake line was sliced. Clean. Deliberate. "This wasn't random, Clara," Ryan muttered. "Someone wanted us to drive and not stop." She whispered, "Langley?" He nodded. Inside, Elliot sat with Kai curled tightly beside him. The dog hadn't left his side since the night of the second dream. Clara knew they needed help. Ryan's phone buzzed. Officer Wyatt. Surveillance showed a hooded figure, tall, limping, walking to their car at 2:13 a.m. Victor Langley. Wyatt's voice was tight. "He's circling." This was a warning. That night, Ryan installed a security system, motion lights, sensors, cameras. Kai paced the house, alert at every creak. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was a guardian. Later, Elliot whispered into Kai's fur, "He's not going to win. You beat him once." And Kai stayed close, his wounds healing, but his purpose sharper than ever. At 2:09 a.m., Clara lay on the couch, unable to sleep. The silence felt too thick. Kai paced, pausing at windows. Then a shatter of glass. Clara bolted up as Kai charged toward the sound. A figure was halfway through the broken window, caught in the blinds. Kai lunged, grabbing the man's jacket hem, yanking hard. The man escaped, leaving behind a torn scrap. On the fabric was a faded patch, a triangle of stars around a central eye. Ryan examined it under lamplight. Private military unit, disbanded years ago. Alan investigated them before he died. Clara's voice trembled. "What if this isn't about evidence? What if it's about Kai?" Ryan's gaze hardened. "Because Kai remembers. He's the last living witness." The wind picked up outside, and they realized they weren't just protecting a dog. They were guarding a truth someone wanted erased. The next afternoon, golden light filtered through the backyard. Under the old oak, Elliot lay beside Kai. The boy hummed a lullaby, soft and wandering. Clara heard it from the kitchen, pausing to listen. For once, the boy was at peace. For once, Kai rested. The quiet felt like safety itself. Elliot whispered, "You're not scared anymore." Kai's tail thumped softly. "Me neither." Ryan watched from upstairs. "They've built something we'll never fully understand," he said. Clara joined him. "It doesn't need to be understood, just protected." Suddenly, Kai's ears lifted. His eyes narrowed toward the distant tree line. The birds fell silent. Elliot sat up. "What is it?" he whispered. Kai didn't bark or growl, but his body leaned forward, listening, waiting. The tension held for a breath, then eased as a breeze moved the branches. Kai settled, but his gaze stayed locked on the trees. He hadn't sounded the alarm, but he hadn't forgotten either. Elliot leaned against him. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'll watch too." And for that fleeting moment beneath the old oak, two guardians waited. The sun sank lower, shadows stretched longer, and the world, cracked as it was, held its breath. The kitchen smelled like burned toast and old coffee. Ryan sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, frustration etched across his face. Clara leaned against the counter, arms folded, her gaze flicking between the broken window they hadn't had time to replace and the boy out back drawing in the dirt. No one had called back, not the detective who promised to follow up, not the officer who took the fabric patch into evidence, not even the local precinct's K-9 unit, whose only comment had been, "That dog shouldn't be in a civilian home." Kai had done more than any of them, and yet they were the ones who hesitated. "No prints, no weapon, no footage clear enough to ID anyone," Ryan muttered, voice flat. "They're not going to touch Victor without a smoking gun." Clara stared at him. "He broke into our home, twice." Ryan didn't respond. His silence said everything. Outside, Kai stood motionless under the oak, eyes scanning the tree line like always. A sentinel in fur, a soldier without a command. Then came the knock at the door. 3 soft raps. Measured, unhurried. Clara answered, not expecting much. The woman on the porch looked out of place, not in a strange way, but in a way that suggested she belonged to a different chapter of the story. Mid-60s, silver hair tied into a neat bun, a leather briefcase worn smooth from years of use. "Sandra Webb," she said calmly, "executor of Sergeant Alan Cole's estate. May I come in?" Clara blinked. "You're—" "Yes," Sandra nodded. "I was also his legal advisor, and more importantly, I know Kai." Kai padded in from the yard as if summoned by name. The moment he saw her, his posture changed, ears lifting, tail wagging once, slow but sure. He stepped forward and pressed his head against her coat. Sandra closed her eyes and rested a hand on the thick fur behind his neck. "You remember," she whispered. "Of course you do." Ryan and Clara led her inside, the air heavy with unspoken questions. They sat around the kitchen table, and for a moment there was just the sound of the fridge humming, and Kai lying at Sandra's feet, a silent bridge between the past and present. "Alan knew he was getting close to something dangerous," she began. "Too close. He believed someone in his unit had ties to an off-grid smuggling operation, narcotics, weapons, human trafficking, but protected by layers of disinformation. He started compiling evidence. He didn't trust many, but he trusted Kai." Ryan leaned forward. "Trusted him to do what?" Sandra looked at him with quiet steel. "To carry classified intel. Kai was part of a pilot program, experimental, memory-triggered recall. Certain dogs were trained to respond only under specific emotional conditions, or to individuals with matching psychological cues." Clara frowned. "You mean the dreams? The connection with Elliot?" Sandra nodded slowly. "Yes. Alan wrote in his final journal entry, 'If anything happens to me, Kai will find the truth if he finds the right person to hear it.'" Ryan sat back, breath shallow. "But no one's listening. Not the police, not the unit. They're ignoring the break-ins, the threats, the evidence." "Because it implicates them," Sandra said flatly. "Victor Langley wasn't acting alone. There are still hands pulling strings. And if you make too much noise without the full picture, they'll silence you too." Silence fell across the room. Elliot appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, pajama shirt rumpled. "Is she one of the good ones?" he asked, looking at Kai. Kai rose, walked over, and gently nudged the boy's shoulder. Elliot smiled. "Okay." Sandra's voice softened. "He's always known who to trust. That's what made him special. Not just his strength, his judgment." She reached into her case and pulled out a small sealed envelope. On the front, in careful handwriting, "To be opened only if Kai returns." She slid it across the table. "Alan left this for whoever found him. It's not everything, but it's the beginning. Clara took it with shaking hands. Do you think this can make the department act? Sandra's eyes darkened. No, but it might make them afraid. Outside, wind began to stir again. Kai stood by the window, eyes locked on the forest, still watching. Because even when no one listens, some truths refuse to stay buried. The storm had passed, but the clouds hadn't moved on. Late that afternoon, the house fell into a hush. Clara folded towels in the living room without really seeing them. Ryan sat at the table with the sealed letter from Alan Cole still unopened, his fingers running across the envelope like it might disappear if he looked away. Kai lay by the back door, head on his paws, eyes flicking toward the window at every movement. And Elliot was quiet. Too quiet. It wasn't the heavy silence of fear. It was something deeper, something focused, intent. From the hallway came the soft sound of shuffling footsteps. Elliot emerged holding something in both hands. Not a toy, not a drawing, a collar. Kai's collar. The one they'd removed at the vet and hadn't yet put back. I was looking for the jingly part, Elliot said, holding it up. But this came out. In his palm sat a small black USB stick, no label, no markings. Just taped to the inside seam of the collar, tucked where no one would feel unless they knew to look. Clara slowly set the towels down. Ryan stood. Where did you find it exactly? Right under the tag, Elliot said. It was scratchy. I think he didn't like it there anymore. Kai, still lying by the door, lifted his head. Ryan crossed the room and took the drive gently, as if it might burn. We need to see what's on it. They gathered in the study, an old converted guest room with Elliot's desk in one corner and Ryan's laptop on the other. The moment the USB plugged in, the screen lit up with a single folder, labeled Cole R6, inside dozens of files, some labeled by date, others by names, a few only numbers. But the ones that stood out were the images. Clara clicked on one. Her breath hitched. A grainy black and white photo, a warehouse exterior, time-stamped, a figure Victor Langley leaning against the wall, speaking with a man whose badge was just barely visible. Another photo, a van with no plates. Boxes being offloaded into a building marked as condemned. A third image, 2 officers escorting what looked like teenagers into a loading bay under the cover of night. Then documents, some typed, some scanned. Project Shieldgate, Phase 2 expansion request. Unregistered transfers, confiscated goods audit, redacted. Agent report, Cole, A, non-compliant with internal chain of command, potential asset risk. Ryan muttered, "This isn't just evidence, this is a death sentence." Elliot sat quietly beside Kai, watching the adults absorb what he already seemed to feel. "It's what he was hiding," Clara whispered. "What got him killed?" Ryan nodded slowly. "And what Kai carried all this time." He opened a final file. A video, just 10 seconds long. A dashboard cam. A shadowed figure climbing into a car, Alan Cole. He closes the door, looks into the camera. His voice, calm but certain. "If this footage is playing, I didn't walk away. Don't trust the badge, trust the dog." The clip ended. No music, no static, just silence. Clara sat back, hands over her mouth. Ryan rubbed his forehead, his voice low. This could unravel everything." Elliot turned to Kai, who was still lying on the rug, breathing steady. "He kept it safe," the boy said, not quite to them. "Even when it hurt." Clara looked at him. "Do you understand what this means?" He nodded. They're going to come. For us. Ryan's eyes darkened. Not if we go first. Kai stood slowly, tail swaying low, eyes alert. He wasn't limping anymore. He was ready. And the war that took his partner hadn't ended. It had just come home. The precinct walls were beige, indifferent, sterile. They smelled faintly of old coffee, disinfectant, and disbelief. Sandra Webb sat at the long table, her blazer still dusted with morning rain. In front of her was the opened file, printouts from the USB, photographs, time-stamped surveillance logs, Alan Cole's short final video. All neatly arranged, all undeniable at least, to anyone who still believed in truth. Across from her sat 2 detectives and 1 federal liaison. None looked impressed. Detective Morales flipped through the pages with tired eyes. "You're saying this came from where, exactly?" "From a collar," Sandra said, trying to keep her voice composed. "A custom-stitched fold beneath the ID tag." "Hidden, but intentionally." Detective Alvarez frowned. "So, let me get this straight. You're submitting what could be classified intel obtained by a dog. That's the origin of your chain of evidence?" Silence. Kai sat at Sandra's side, calm, still. His eyes locked on Alvarez's face. Sandra inhaled. "The dog wasn't random. His name is Kai, German Shepherd. Police K9, badge ID 94K09. He was the partner of Sergeant Alan Cole, who, if you remember, was found dead in a forest clearing 1 year ago, caused stabbing, case unsolved, ruled an accident." Detective Morales scoffed softly. "And you're saying the dog walked away and came back with a flash drive full of federal secrets?" Before Sandra could respond, a small voice echoed from the open door. "I am." They all turned. Elliot stood there, hands in the pockets of his red jacket, the one with the fraying sleeves. His parents had stayed outside. He'd asked them to. But something inside him said this part was his. Kai didn't move as the boy walked in. He simply watched, trusted. Elliot stood beside Sandra, placing one hand gently on Kai's shoulder. "You're the kid from the witness report," Alvarez said, a little softer now. Elliot nodded. "I didn't see it with my eyes. Not the first time. But I felt it. In here." He touched his chest. "I had dreams. Then they weren't just dreams anymore." Morales leaned forward. "Dreams? I saw the forest," Elliot continued. "The man in the uniform, Sergeant Cole. He was hurt. Kai tried to stop it. He barked. He fought. But the other man, he had a knife." No one spoke. "I saw his eyes, both of them, Kai's and the bad man's." Elliot's voice didn't shake. "And I remember because Kai remembered. He didn't forget. Not 1 second." Sandra cleared her throat, voice steady again. "I know this doesn't fit your protocols, but you're not dealing with a normal case. This dog was trained to detect not just explosives, not just narcotics, but threats, human threats. He was embedded in an internal investigation. That flash drive didn't fall into the wrong hands because Kai buried it, hid it, survived with it." Alvarez sat back. "You're asking us to accept testimony from a child and a dog." "I'm asking you to follow what's real," Sandra said quietly. "Not what's easy." Morales looked again at the photo from the drive, the one of Victor Langley exchanging goods near the docks. "This could blow open Shield Gate. It's not just cops. These are contracts, Military handoffs. Someone is feeding both sides. Alvarez hesitated, then looked at Kai. He doesn't even know we're talking about him, he muttered. But Kai lifted his head, met Alvarez's eyes, and didn't blink. A long silence stretched before Morales broke it. You said the USB was found in the collar? Sandra nodded. Chain of custody begins now. He opened a drawer and pulled out an evidence bag. Print the documents, duplicate the drive, log the discovery. Let's do this by the book. And if even half of this checks out... Alvarez stood. Then that dog just gave testimony in the biggest internal corruption case we've seen in 10 years. Elliot let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Kai sat down beside him again, leaning gently against the boy's leg. I told him we'd keep him safe, Elliot said, looking at no one in particular. But he's the one who kept the truth safe. The night was unnervingly still. Not the kind of peace that calmed you, but the kind that warned. That waited. Even the crickets had gone silent, as if nature itself had drawn in a breath and refused to let it go. Inside the house, Clara stood at the sink, rinsing a dish beneath a slow, rhythmic drip. The television hummed low in the background, static-filled and muted. Ryan had just stepped into the den to check the security feed. One of the cameras had blinked off for a moment. Kai didn't move. Not at first. He lay beside Elliot's bed, eyes half closed, one ear twitching. But then he lifted his head, slowly, intently. Something had changed. He stood. A low growl built in his throat, not feral but deliberate, focused. He turned toward the window, and then he ran. Claws scraping hardwood, Kai bolted down the hallway, past Clara, past the living room. Ryan called after him, startled, but Kai didn't stop. He hit the back door with his shoulder and barked. Once. Sharp. Commanding. That bark was unlike any they'd heard from him before. Elliot sat up in bed. He's here. Clara froze. Who? Kai knows. Out back, moonlight spilled across the yard like shattered silver, and standing just beyond the tree line emerging from shadow was Victor Langley. He wasn't hiding this time. He walked with purpose. A pistol in one hand, black gloves on both, no mask. Just a stare that didn't blink. His coat flapped open in the wind like a flag no longer pretending to hide. Ryan burst out the back door, flashlight raised, but Victor didn't even flinch. You shouldn't have opened the box, Victor said flatly. Kai launched forward. The movement was so fast, so sudden, Victor barely had time to raise the weapon before 85 pounds of trained muscle crashed into him. The gun fired once into the air, wild, but Kai was already on top of him, jaws locked onto Victor's arm. They hit the ground hard. Victor screamed, twisted, tried to strike, but Kai didn't let go. Not this time. Clara had dialed 911 the moment the shot rang out. Officer down! Shots fired, 27 Glenridge Road. Hurry, he's armed, my son's in the house. Ryan ran into the yard just in time to see Victor elbow Kai, grab the gun again, and aim. But Kai ducked under the shot. The bullet cracked through a bird feeder, sending splinters of wood flying. "Drop it!" Ryan shouted, leveling his own pistol. "Don't move!" Victor hesitated. Eyes bloodshot, panting, then made one last lunge toward the back steps. He never made it. Kai took him down again, this time slamming him against the tree stump near the fence. A sickening crunch echoed across the yard. The gun skidded away, landing inches from the garden hose. Victor didn't get back up. Police sirens howled in the distance, swelling louder by the second. Kai stood over Victor's limp body, chest heaving, fur matted with sweat and dirt. He didn't move, Didn't bark, didn't snarl. He simply stood guard over the truth he'd nearly died protecting. Clara ran to Elliot's room. He was at the window, wide-eyed but calm. "He did it," Elliot whispered. "He finished it." Clara pulled him close, burying her face in his hair, heart still racing. When officers arrived, Kai didn't resist. He backed up slowly, head low, letting them cuff the unconscious man. Ryan handed over the weapon. EMTs confirmed Victor had a fractured shoulder, possibly ribs, but he was alive. "He's the last piece," Ryan said quietly. "He knew everything." One officer looked at Kai. "That dog, he just saved your whole family." Ryan nodded. "He's done more than that." As dawn approached, the yard was taped off, the cameras rewound, the evidence tagged. But through all the flashing lights and shouting radios, Elliot slipped out to the porch, barefoot in his pajamas. Kai sat there already, bruised, exhausted, but upright. Elliot knelt down beside him, wrapping his arms around the dog's thick neck. "You came back for him," the boy whispered. "And tonight, you came back for us." Kai rested his head gently against the child's chest. In the faintest pre-dawn light, the shadows finally stepped back, and this time they didn't return. The snow had started falling just after midnight. It came in soft spirals, carried by the wind, quiet, almost reverent. But beneath that calm, the earth was still trembling from the violence that had just unfolded. Red stained the white. Patches of it. Too much of it. Clara knelt in the snow, her knees soaked through her flannel pajamas, trembling fingers pressed against Kai's side. The German shepherd lay on the porch, his breath ragged, his eyes only half open. Blood seeped through the thick fur of his shoulder, warm against the cold, staining Clara's palms with the kind of truth you never wanted to hold. Ryan was crouched nearby, pressing a towel against the wound, his jaw tight, his voice steady but breaking. "Stay with me, buddy. Come on. You've made it through worse. Don't give up now." The blue and red lights of approaching cruisers flickered against the falling snow, painting the yard in desperate rhythm. Victor Langley had been dragged off in cuffs, unconscious, face bloodied, arm broken from the fall. But no one was looking at him now. Every eye was on the dog who had saved them all. Kai whimpered once barely audible and shifted his head toward Elliot. The boy stood barefoot at the doorway, wrapped in a blanket too big for him, his lips trembling not from the cold, but from something far deeper. He looked at Kai not with the fear of a child, but with the helplessness of a soul watching something sacred slip away. He stepped forward. "Kai." The dog's eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus, but he heard that voice. He always did. Elliot sank down beside him, the blanket falling from his shoulders. His small hand found the place behind Kai's ear, stroking it gently, like he'd done the very first night. "You can't go," Elliot whispered. "Not yet. You're not done." The boy leaned closer, his forehead resting against Kai's muzzle. "You promised you'd stay." Clara's breath hitched. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in her throat. She had doubted, hesitated, feared, and yet here was this creature, bleeding out on her porch because he had chosen them, because he had protected them. The sirens cut out as the police arrived. EMTs stormed the yard, shouting codes and signals, but Ryan raised a hand. "Easy. He's not a threat. He's the hero." The vet on call arrived moments later, a woman named Dr. Hayes, breathless and urgent. "Kai?" she gasped, already setting down her kit. "No, not again." She'd seen him before. She knew. With practiced speed, she assessed the wound, listening for breath sounds, checking for fractures. "Through the muscle," she muttered. "Possible lung graze. He's lucky it didn't puncture deeper." She paused, looked up. "But I won't lie, if we don't get him warm and stabilized now, he won't make it through the next hour." "I'm going with him," Elliot said immediately. Dr. Hayes looked at him, startled, then at Clara and Ryan. Ryan nodded. "We all are." As they prepared the stretcher, something unexpected happened. Kai tried to stand. His paws scrabbled weakly at the porch wood. His body trembled. Clara gasped and tried to stop him, but Elliot didn't. "Let him," he whispered. "He's not ready to be carried." With a broken breath, Kai pushed up legs wobbling, weight uneven but still. He stood. Only for a second. But in that second, he looked at Elliot, then Clara, then Ryan, and for the first time since the night he arrived, he let out a low, deep bark, not one of warning, but of presence, of "I'm still here." And then, gently, he collapsed into Ryan's arms. Back at the animal hospital, under emergency heat pads and oxygen, Kai drifted between waking and sleep. Tubes ran from his side. His heartbeat was slow but steady. Beside him, Elliot refused to rest. He held Kai's paw the entire night. "I know it still hurts," Elliot whispered, eyes glistening. "But you don't have to run anymore. You're safe. We're safe." And as the snow piled higher outside, inside that small exam room, warmth bloomed from a place beyond medicine. A boy. A dog. A bond written in more than blood. The sun hadn't risen yet. The sky outside the hospital window was a bruised violet, still clinging to night. But inside the waiting room, time had blurred into something shapeless. Just breath. Just waiting. Just hope, stretched thin like the thread of a prayer. Ryan sat slumped in the corner, his hand wrapped around a half-drunk coffee. Clara leaned against the armrest beside him, silent, fingers absently running through Elliot's hair where he rested on her lap. Across from them, Sandra Webb stood holding the old metal box they had recovered from Henry Walker's house, the one Kai had scratched toward in that final act of memory. "I went through it again," she said quietly, voice rough from lack of sleep. "There's something we missed." Ryan sat up. Clara blinked. Elliot stirred but didn't speak. Sandra opened the box, lifting the top layer of files. Beneath a false divider wedged deep in the base was a thin, sealed envelope. Its edges were frayed, the paper brittle, but the name written in black ink hadn't faded. Sergeant Alan Cole, for whom it may concern. She handed it to Clara with shaking fingers. "He wrote this before he died. I think he knew." Clara opened the envelope carefully, unfolding the pages inside. There were 4 sheets each, handwritten in tight, meticulous strokes. The first line stopped her breath. "If you are reading this, I am already gone. I joined the force to protect. But somewhere along the line, protection became politics, and justice became a threat. I uncovered a ring, an internal operation laundering confiscated evidence and rerouting it through former officers. Names I trusted, people I considered brothers. I documented everything, and I knew when I got too close they would silence me. They tried, but I didn't die right away. Kai got me out. He fought through the dark, through the pain, but I told him to run when I couldn't move anymore. He hesitated. God, he always did when it came to me. But I ordered him. Last command. This box contains the names I cleared, and the ones I couldn't. I leave it now, not in anger, but in hope. I knew I might not live to see justice, but Kai will. He remembers, he never forgets. And if he found you, then maybe, just maybe, there's still something worth saving in this world. When Clara looked up, tears had already blurred the words. Her hand gripped the final page like it might vanish if she let go. Across the room, Elliot had risen. He walked over, barefoot on the cold tile, and pressed his hand on the page, not to read it, but to feel it. "He didn't just find us," the boy said quietly. "He brought us here because he knew we'd listen." Sandra blinked quickly. "This letter," it names Victor Langley, and 2 others still active in the department. It clears Cole's partner. It shows where the original USB was meant to go. This isn't just testimony. "It's a deathbed confession," Ryan said softly. "No," Elliot whispered. "It's a promise." They looked at him. Elliot stared out the hallway window toward the ICU, where Kai still fought for breath. Alan told him to survive, and Kai did. All this time he remembered, until someone else could finish the job. He looked up at the adults. "That's us now." That afternoon, Sandra handed the entire file letter, photos, recovered evidence to the district attorney's office. By nightfall, an emergency hearing was ordered. 2 officers were placed on leave pending investigation. Victor Langley faced additional charges. The wheels of justice creaked forward, not with fanfare, not with glory, but with truth. Quiet, steady truth. And beside it, the memory of a man who never stopped believing in his partner, and the dog who never forgot him. The snow hadn't melted yet. It clung to the sidewalks like an old memory quiet, unwilling to leave. The town had returned to routine, and even the neighbors, once captivated by the dog that saved a boy and exposed corruption, now treated it like a half-forgotten tale. But not in the Quinn household. Inside, everything felt slower, softer, heavier. Kai no longer rose at dawn. His paws trembled. His breath came in shallow tides, and his chest rose with effort, not strength. It was Elliot who noticed the change, not the limp or lowered head, but the silence in Kai's eyes. "He's tired," the boy whispered, pressing his cheek to Kai's side. Clara knelt beside them. "We'll take him in today, just for a check." But Elliot didn't move. "He already told me. He said goodbye. Last night." At the vet's, Dr. Menard was kind, but honest. "It's heart failure. Advanced. The muscle's too weak. He's been hiding it as long as he could." "How long?" Ryan asked quietly. "Days. A week, maybe. He's holding on with instinct and love." Elliot nodded, as if he'd already known. "He said the trees are quiet where he's going, and there's a whistle he remembers. The last command Alan gave him, stay alive." They brought him home. The couch became his post, sunlight warming his fur. Elliot never left his side, reading to him in whispers, placing his favorite rubber ball beside his paw. "He's not scared," Elliot said one night. "He just doesn't want to leave me behind." 3 days later, as the snow began to melt, Kai's tail twitched once. Not in play, just memory. Then, gently, he nudged Elliot's hand. One last time. A breath. A pause. A farewell. "I know," Elliot whispered. "You kept your promise." They buried him beneath the old oak, wrapped in Elliot's quilt. His badge tag rested on his chest, the rubber ball at his paws. No one spoke at first. The silence was for heroes. Elliot stepped forward with a toy badge and a photo of Kai with his first handler, Alan. The boy placed them gently on Kai's body. He wasn't lost. He was coming home, he said. Ryan and Clara let the soil fall softly, each handful more than grief-filled with gratitude. They marked the grave simply, faithful, found, and beneath that, Elliot wrote in crooked letters, "I'll see you in the trees." That night, rain came gently, sealing the grave. The house was quieter, not from sorrow, but from a peace that followed the storm. Elliot slept by the window, humming the old lullaby himself. "Sleep now, keeper of the trail. Through night and wind your watch prevails." Clara stood in the doorway listening. His voice wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was steady, it was his, and it was for Kai. When he finished, the wind answered, not in gusts, but a soft breeze that curled around his cheeks. His eyes fluttered closed, a smile on his lips. Outside, Clara heard it, soft, far off. A bark. Not imagined. And the tears came, not from grief, but relief. In the stillness beneath the oak, something remained. Not just a memory, a presence, watching, guarding. Because some goodbyes aren't endings, they're oaths. It had been 74 days since they buried Kai. 74 mornings of quiet breakfasts. 74 nights of lullabies sung to empty corners. Grief, Clara had learned, didn't leave like a storm. It settled like fog lifting slowly, clinging to the edges, returning when least expected. Today, though, the fog felt thinner. They stood outside the Haven Ridge Animal Rescue's annual adoption event, tents strung with cheerful banners, children laughing, dogs barking, tails wagging in chaos and joy. Clara adjusted Elliot's scarf and knelt to his eye level. "You don't have to go in if you're not ready," she whispered. Elliot's eyes stayed on the entrance. Quiet. Steady. He simply nodded, then took her hand and led the way. Inside the main tent, the noise was overwhelming at first, crates rattling, volunteers calling names, leashes crisscrossing. Ryan helped a woman lift a mutt into a pen, while Clara browsed the rows of pups, beagles, labs, terriers, all vying for attention. But Elliot? He didn't look at any of them. He walked past the wagging tails, the eager eyes, the paws pressed to metal bars, past the distractions, past the noise. And then he stopped. In the back corner was a small crate. Inside, curled tight in the shadow like he was trying not to be noticed, lay a young German shepherd. His fur was too big for his frame, ears too floppy, eyes too wide. He wasn't barking. He wasn't moving. He was watching. Elliot crouched low. Their eyes met, and in that instant Clara saw it, the stillness, the recognition, the whisper that didn't need words. The puppy inched forward, unsure. His paws made no sound. When he reached the edge of the crate, he sniffed, but didn't lick. He didn't yelp or wag. He just looked, like he was trying to understand something ancient in the boy's face. And the boy? He smiled, soft, gentle. Then he leaned in and whispered, "Your name is Scout." One of the volunteers noticed the scene and approached. "That one's new," she said gently. "Came in from a roadside rescue just last week. He doesn't do well with most people. Won't eat unless it's quiet. We think he lost his litter in the cold." Clara watched Elliot reach through the bars and touch the pup's nose. The puppy didn't pull back. "He hasn't let anyone touch him," the volunteer added, now blinking. But Elliot was already undoing the crate latch. Clara opened her mouth about to object, but the words caught in her throat. The moment wasn't loud. It was sacred. Scout stepped out. No leash, no command. He walked forward like he'd been waiting, like some piece of him already belonged. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passed. Clouds shifted. Leaves danced down the sidewalk. But inside that tent, for just a breath of time, everything held still. Clara knelt beside her son, watching as Scout placed his head under Elliot's palm and closed his eyes. Elliot looked up at her and whispered, "He's not Kai." "No," she said softly, kneeling beside them. "He doesn't have to be." Elliot nodded, then added, "But he remembers, too. Just in a different way." Scout let out a small, almost inaudible whimper somewhere between nervousness and relief. Ryan approached, watching the scene unfold like a man afraid to breathe too loud. "Looks like we're adopting again," he said, his voice thick with something he didn't name. Clara smiled, tears catching light in her lashes. Not grief this time, but gratitude. As they walked out into the winter light, Scout at Elliot's side, the puppy hesitated for a moment at the edge of the sidewalk. He looked back, toward nothing and everything, toward what was. Then, after a long pause, he stepped forward. Elliot whispered again, this time barely audible, "You're safe now." The snow had melted into damp patches of brown earth and soggy leaves. Winter hadn't quite let go, but spring was trying. It was the kind of season caught in between, where nothing bloomed, yet nothing slept. Elliot sat on the front steps, a book in his lap but forgotten. His gaze stayed fixed on the yard where Scout stood, ears high, body still watching the wind, watching the edges of the woods, watching something no one else could see. Ryan glanced up from the toolbox in the garage. "He's been doing that a lot lately," he said to Clara, who leaned on the porch rail with a mug of tea between her hands. Clara nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the pup. Same spot, same time every morning. They both knew what had stood there once, where Kai had growled, where truth had come out from the dark. But this was different. Scout wasn't afraid. He wasn't even tense. He was aware, like the memory of another dog had passed down a set of instructions. Later that afternoon, while Clara folded laundry by the fireplace, Elliot and Scout played in the living room. But it wasn't really play, not like other kids and dogs. No chaos, no fetch, no shrieking laughter. Instead, Elliot whispered small phrases. "Stay. Come. Watch," Scout responded. Not always perfect, but something in him understood the rhythm. His tail didn't wag for treats. It wagged when Elliot's voice softened, when the world went quiet, when something right was happening. Clara pretended not to watch, but tears found her anyway. That evening they visited the oak, the one that stood guard over Kai's grave. Elliot carried the small lantern Ryan had fixed with a new bulb. Scout walked beside him, not on a leash, not nudged, just there, the way Kai had once been. They reached the patch of earth beneath the thick roots. The wind had stilled, the stars had begun to blink awake, and Elliot, without being asked, knelt and brushed the leaves away from the wooden plaque they had carved by hand. Kai guardian, partner, family. He never left. Not really. Scout sat beside him, not on command, but with intent, like the spot called to him. Elliot didn't speak for a long time. His fingers traced the name. His breath came slow. Then he smiled. "He's teaching him, Mom." Clara's breath caught. Elliot turned slightly, his face soft with something not quite sadness, not quite joy either. "From the stars," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like it was the only thing that made sense. That night, after Elliot had fallen asleep curled beside Scout on a blanket, Ryan lingered at the door. He watched as the pup stirred in his sleep legs, twitching, breath quickening. A dream? Or a memory not his own? Ryan didn't know. But when he stepped forward, the puppy woke. Not startled, not scared, just alert, watching. Ryan crouched beside him and whispered, "Still watching over him, huh?" Scout blinked and rested his head back down, one paw on Elliot's hand. In the days that followed, it became unmistakable. Scout would move before footsteps sounded. He would bark, not loud, but sharp at unfamiliar boots. He never chased birds or squirrels, but he watched door frames, windows, cars that parked too long. The instincts weren't playful. They were protective, measured, like muscle memory born from something deeper than life. Elliot would simply nod whenever Clara noticed. He knows. And for the first time in weeks, Clara stopped asking how. She started saying thank you. One afternoon, Sandra Webb returned. She had a folder in her hand and a worn photograph in her coat pocket. One she hadn't planned to bring, but something told her it was time. Scout met her at the gate. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He sat down and tilted his head, curious. Then he stepped aside. Sandra blinked. "That's impossible," she whispered. But Ryan only smiled. "We've learned not to use that word around here." Inside, Sandra showed Elliot the photograph. Alan Cole, kneeling beside a young Kai. The dog looked straight at the camera, focused, unblinking. Scout stood beside the table, his gaze locked on the photo. His ears twitched. Then, softly, he whined, as if he remembered something he hadn't lived. Sandra knelt and placed the picture near the pup. "You've still got work to do, don't you?" she murmured. Scout nudged the photo with his nose and lay down beside it. Every Sunday morning, before the town stirred, before the sun warmed the porch steps, Elliot made his quiet walk beneath the oak tree. The grass had started growing again, not in wild tufts, but soft, even blades that gently cradled the wooden plaque nestled beneath the roots. Kai, guardian, partner, family. Each week, Elliot brought a different flower, sometimes a daffodil from Clara's garden, sometimes a wild violet he found on the path, and sometimes on colder days, just a single white rose, carefully saved from a bouquet long faded. He never said much, only 5 words. "Thank you, Kai," he whispered. Always the same, but always different in meaning. Some weeks it was for protection, other weeks for the memory, sometimes for a dream that hadn't yet faded. Clara watched him from the kitchen window, hands still soapy in the sink, but eyes fixed on her son and the stillness that surrounded him. Scout often followed, never interfering, just sitting a few steps away, ears alert but relaxed, as if he too understood that this was a sacred ritual, not for the dead, but for the bond that never really broke. One morning, when the clouds hung low and silver, and the leaves above trembled though the air was still, Elliot lingered longer than usual. He sat cross-legged beside the grave, flower in hand, but hadn't placed it down yet. Scout lay at his side, head on his paws. Elliot spoke softly, more to the wind than anything else. "I still remember your voice," he said. "It wasn't made of words, but I heard it." His fingers brushed over the engraved letters. "You told me not to be afraid." A pause. "I wasn't." He closed his eyes, let the quiet settle into his chest. "I'm not." The wind rustled gently above him. No storm, no omen. Just presence. Back inside, Ryan sat with a faded newspaper in hand, one he refused to throw away. The front page still bore the headline, "Hero K9 uncovers department scandal. Justice for Sergeant." Alan Cole. Beneath it, the photo of Kai, battle-worn, eyes steady sitting beside Elliot in the hospital after the final confrontation. The boy had only said one sentence to the reporters that day. He didn't bark at the truth. He led it home. Ryan looked up as Elliot came through the door, Scout padding behind him like a shadow. "Everything okay out there?" Ryan asked. Elliot gave a slow, thoughtful nod. "He's still here," he said. Ryan didn't question what he meant. He didn't need to. That night, Clara tucked Elliot into bed. Scout curled up at the foot of the mattress, tail thumping twice as if to say, "You're safe. I'm here." Elliot stared at the ceiling for a while, then asked, "Do you think dogs stay when they're gone?" Clara smiled, smoothing back his hair. "I think the ones who gave everything don't know how to leave." Elliot turned his head, voice small. "Even if they're tired?" Clara's chest ached. "Kai's body got tired," she whispered, "but his love didn't." Later, as the moonlight stretched long fingers across the bedroom wall, the wind picked up just enough to rattle the oak leaves. Scout lifted his head, listened, then rested it again, eyes half closed but watching. Outside, beneath the tree, the small white flower glowed faintly in the nightlight. A few petals drifted loose and carried away into the dark, lifted by something softer than wind. And if someone stood close enough, if they stood still enough, they might hear it too. The faint whisper of a breath, the creak of old branches, a soft thump like the rhythm of a tail against the earth, the sound of a guardian who never left, who only stepped back to watch from higher ground. In every chapter of this story, Kai reminded us of something quietly powerful. Loyalty is not measured by time, but by presence. In a world where things move fast and trust is often fragile, a dog like Kai teaches us the value of staying, of watching, of loving without words. German shepherds, with their fierce loyalty and gentle strength, embody more than just service. They carry our hopes, our safety, and sometimes our grief. But this story isn't only about a dog. It's about healing, about a boy who found his voice again through a bond no one could explain, about a family rediscovering trust, and about the belief that even after the hardest endings, something new can begin. Kai may have come into Elliot's life by chance, but he stayed by something deeper, a purpose, a promise, a truth that doesn't end when the heartbeat does. So if this story moved you, hold it close. Hug your dog a little tighter, speak kindness, even in silence. And remember, some guardians never truly leave us. They just change where they stand. Sometimes, right beneath the oak tree. Thank you for listening.